everyone, and welcome to the Fireheart Darlings fan podcast. I'm Gracie.
And I'm Lauren.
And our podcast is essentially dealing with anything that is related to the author Sarah J. Maas. Her Throne of Glass series or her A Court of Whatever series. And last week we talked about how A Court of Thorns and Roses was very similar to Beauty and the Beast. And this week we're actually going to talk about how the sequel, A Court of Mist and Fury, is very similar to Hades and Persephone, the myth. And Lauren, if you could kindly tell us what the myth is.
Okay, so there's a lot of variations on the myth, and interesting enough, the beginning is often left out in a lot of the traditional tales. So how it starts out, Demeter and Zeus have this daughter Persephone, and Demeter keeps her locked away in Sicily, supposedly to keep her safe and guarded. She gives her with paint box to help her color flowers. She becomes the goddess of spring. And then eventually Zeus and Hades decide to marry off Persephone to Hades, which I feel like this is a really important part that they totally leave out in a lot of other tales. But where it normally starts is that Persephone and Demeter don't know that Hades basically is being married to Persephone. She one day leaves the safety of her companions to examine this narcissus flower, which in some tales Gaia specifically created to lure Persephone. And then Hades comes through this chasm in the earth in this charcoal chariot to take her to the underworld. And from here on, it's sometimes described as the rape of Persephone, but it's really important to know that in old-timey language, rape doesn't always mean sexual assault and violence. And I know this is weird, but this is actually true, that, women were viewed as property. This is the time of that. They're property of men. So a rape was akin to an abduction, but a lesser version of it. It was basically any time a woman left the household of her father unaccompanied and entered the household of another man. So if you were to move in with somebody, that would be technically considered a rape. In my medieval romance course in college, I learned that there were even instances of women organizing their own kidnappings or rapes to marry men that their parents disapproved of, because you kind of assume that intercourse happens, so you kind of have to get married. It's this very weird thing, but that's how it is. And it's only really called the rape of Persephone in post-Christian times. You see a lot of differences. Once Christianity happens, it really changes the myth from the ancient Greek tale. And one of the big ones with that is her reactions. Later ones have her being so distraught that she won't eat and she cries all the time. But if you look at the earlier tales, she's really falling for Hades, but she won't acknowledge it. And so because she doesn't want to acknowledge it, she refuses any gifts he give her, all the food and entertainment, because she feels her power over him would fade if she knew how much she cares about him. She kind of keeps him on a leash and is really sarcastic and biting with him. But no matter who's telling the tale, Demeter is always distraught. She starts to withhold the gifts of the earth, which is her special thing. And it ends up forcing Zeus's hand to return Persephone. However, there's this deal that if she ate anything in the underworld, she must stay there. It's this weird magical binding thing. And an important thing is Hades always lets Persephone go. But because she ate pomegranate seeds, she must stay. In some tales, Hades tricks her. In some tales, another character gives her the seeds. In some more modernized tales, Persephone chooses to eat the seeds. She consciously wants to remain in the underworld and be the queen there. But either way, Persephone must now divide her time between the earth and Olympus and the underworld. And another important thing to note is Hades is never viewed as evil. He's viewed as terrible sometimes, but just. He's this aspect of divine law. Once you get into a post-Christianized world, you have him being violent and changeable and wrathful.
And kind of like Satan.
Where you have this conflation with the underworld and hell and Hades and Satan, which you don't see in ancient Greek tales. It's very important that he kind of got thrown into it, because you have at the beginning, these lots were cast. Zeus got the sky, Poseidon got the ocean, and Hades got the underworld. he didn't choose this. He was really literally thrust into this, and he had to kind of make the best of a situation. And it's not just him creating all these laws down there. There's a whole multitude of deities that are in charge of it and create these divine laws down there.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's basically the myth, you know? So she has to go back and forth between worlds for eternity. But at least she still gets to spend some time with the man that she loves.
Yeah, and... Yeah,
in the end, it's a love story.
Mm-hmm. But it's also a love story that explains winter and spring, the changing of the seasons, and this was created to explain that in a religious sense.
Yeah, at least an ancient religious sense.
Yeah, ancient religious sense. Yeah.
Now that you know the myth, which I'm pretty sure the majority of you already did know it, because that's one of the favorite ones that they like to share, you know, we're going to talk about what's very similar. One of the first things is how Tamlin is a lot like Demeter. Think about it. He keeps Feyre locked up in the spring court for her own good, quote unquote. He has the power to grow things. I mean, he's the High Lord of the spring court. Demeter is the goddess of spring. See where I'm going? And not to mention, they also have the Calanmai thing, you know, where every year there's this huge orgy.
Essentially, yes.
That's what it is. I mean, like, they have a whole bunch of sex because sex means fertility. And
magic stuff happens with sex.
It's very primal. Someone actually in one of the Facebook groups I'm in had an interesting fan theory where either Tamlin chose Ianthe in the last... Ianthe, I guess that's how you say her name.
Let's go with it.
Ianthe, okay. Anyway, he chose Ianthe in the last Calanmai rite, and now she's pregnant. Or he refused to sleep with anyone during the last Calanmai, and because of that, spring is wasting away, which is why he's more urgent in trying to find Feyre, and why he teams up with the King of Hybern. So, whether that's actually what happened or not, it's a cool theory that totally fits in with the myth that we're talking about. Where, except in the myth, it was Demeter going to Hades going like, listen here, you fucker.
Oh, but it's even less than that because she can't do this. So it's always Hermes that has to go in between, or like Zeus commanding it. Yeah. Which I like that you actually have women giving power in A Court of Mist and Fury. You have it instead of the guys making the decision. Oh, we can get into that later with the differences. Let's, I guess, stick to the similarities.
Yeah. Another thing about the Tamlin as Demeter is he gets, his idea is to get the Maiden of Spring to return, and he thinks the mating bond is broken and that Feyre is just brainwashed. Whether that's actually what he thinks or not, we don't really know. We probably won't find out until ACOWAR, A Court of Wings and Ruin, which comes out in May. But rest assured, we will be digesting that after it's released, trust me.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh. I can't wait to find out what you think of it and to get to know it for myself. That's going to be the best thing ever.
We're definitely going to do a post-mortem episode after we finish reading it so we can fangirl together, and hopefully you guys will just like the conversation. Then, of course, we have Feyre and Persephone. Feyre as Persephone, rather. And there were a couple of key points on that. The deal with Rhysand, that one was the one that stood out to me the most. When she has to spend a week with him of every month.
Yeah, because sometimes in the myth, it's about a fourth of the year. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that you have it coming up once a week. It's still like a fourth of the time that she has to spend there.
Exactly. Think about it. Do that meme with the guy touching his head, the new one that they got out. You don't have to do. Yeah, okay. That was a really bad joke. She's associated with spring because of her relationship with Tamlin, but also with the painting aspects. And she likes to paint flowers, but also paint the night sky. So,
yeah.
It's kind of like foreshadowing.
I know, foreshadowing a book away. Like, I was so impressed with that. I was like, you go, Sarah J. Maas. I did not see that one coming. How did you slip that in there?
I started, when I started rereading, it mentions how she has all these flowers painted on the table and on the dresser and stuff. But there was a very key paragraph where she talks about the night sky that she had painted on the dresser. And I was like, you daggone it, Maas. You did it again. You foreshadowed, and I didn't realize it till you reread. Yeah,
because you would think, okay, she's going to be spring, that there would be something with that would stick out at you, but it doesn't when you're reading it at the time. And then afterwards, you're like, oh, okay.
Darn you, that was a good hint, and I didn't get it. Then there's the fact that, Persephone leaves her companions to look at the flower, and Hades takes her away. Well, while as Feyre is just like screaming in her head, I don't want to get married. I don't want to get married. And then all of a sudden, Rhys shows up like a dark knight in dark wings and dark armor. He's not a...
No one knows about the wings yet.
No, he doesn't have the wings yet. But, we know he has wings. I'm sorry. Rhys is my baby. He's my favorite Maas male character, okay? He's my darling.
With that. Oh my gosh, he's so complicated and interesting. And we can talk more about that when we get to Hades. Let's try to wrap up with Persephone. And then we can just Rhys!
Yes, I know. Then we can fangirl some more. There's the change of seasons thing where Feyre plans to return to the night court after wreaking havoc on the spring court. When she returns with Tamlin, things are different at the spring court because she isn't there, and he's really let it go to rot because he's been so obsessed with getting her back. So,
yeah, and you have it where it's like she starts out in the spring court, then the night court, and she keeps going kind of back and forth. So you get that sense of the change of seasons, or at least for her, that it's two very different worlds when she's in the spring court and the night court.
Yeah, and she actually finds herself liking the night court, even though Tamlin's like, why would you like the night court? It's awful there. Also, Rhys sucks.
Yeah. And then that's basically what Lucian says to her, like, girl, what are you doing? Let's go home. And she shows her wings, and she's like, bitch, I am home, basically.
I ain't going nowhere. Persephone, in several interpretations, is also considered very powerful and a true queen. She's not like this, oh my god, the world is out to get me, Mary Sue, that's so weak and everything. She doesn't back down, though at first she is seen as a young maiden that is trapped with an overbearing mother who doesn't like her to, quote, spread her wings. Feyre is kept protected and unable to use her potential because of Tamlin. He wants to keep her close, and he wants to say, no, babe, I got this, I'm the man. Mm-hmm. And then she finally breaks free, and Rhysand lets her, actually get to know her powers. And then she turns into a badass queen, with Rhys teaching her and helping her. So that's she's a badass.
And it's everything it's everything we've been waiting for. She's finally, we get to see her blossom and actually become her own person. She's not having to struggle to survive, having to prove herself, to just blossom in who she is as a woman.
Yeah, exactly. She turns into this amazing woman. And she doesn't need a man, not really. I mean, it's cool that she has Rhys, but even Rhys knows that she could kick his ass if she really wanted to.
Yeah, and really. She reminds us, you have powers from all of the courts, and I think there's at one point where he's threatening somebody, and I can't even remember who, but he's like, oh, blah, blah, blah. Instead of being oh, I'm going to kick your ass, she's like, Freyra's going to kick your ass, and then I'm going to kick your ass too. And I'm like, yes, you go, girl.
Yeah, he was very quick to say, it's not me that's gonna do it. It's her that's gonna do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to let her do her, and then I'm going to do me.
Oh, now I remember. It was at the Court of Nightmares. It was when Moore's dad was insulting her. And then he was like, oh.
Moore's dad.
Yeah, he's like, oh, your hand's going to break, and then this is going to happen. And then after Feyre's done with you. And then I'm like, yes, you go.
Now we get to talk about Rhys.
Yay!
Rhysand is my baby. And I feel like a lot of people agree. I did a poll, actually, a reactions poll to see who liked Rhys. It was Rhys versus Rowan. And, like, Rhysand won by a huge margin. So I think I'm not going out on much of a limb here to say he's the favorite male character in the Maas fandom as a whole. Like, we'll get into Rowan later, but, like, Rhys is really the guy. And I think that has more of a reflection of Maas's writing as she's progressed, because, you know, she started writing these books when she was 16, and you can tell the difference between Throne of Glass versus Empire of Storms, and you can tell that the writing is different in each series, and you know that there's more experience put into the second series than there is the first one. So.
Yeah, and she really lays down the groundwork for who Rhys is going to be in the first one, and then you get all these clues later once there's like these big reveals and these long talks in A Court of Mist and Fury about, you know, who he's had to become to protect the people that he cares about most.
Yeah, he had to turn to a dark place. I mean, oh God, we could do a whole podcast dedicated to how much I love Rhys and the reasons why. We might, because...
We might just have to do that. Why Rhys should be your book boyfriend.
Why Rhys should be your book boyfriend. Okay, but we're not going to do that today. We're just going to talk about how he relates to Hades. Now, Hades is regarded by modern retellings as a super bad dude, and, you know, he's supposed to be like Satan. And in the books, anybody besides Rhysand and his inner circle, and I think Valeris is the name of his hidden city.
Yes.
Like, everybody there knows that he's really a good person. But, like, outside of that, everyone perceives him as evil because he had to, you know, work with Amarantha in order to keep Valeris and his people safe. And that meant being awful and, you know, doing whatever he could. But, like, people died and there was nothing he could do about it. But he's not evil.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing to like how you handle a war situation. You have some people that just kind of take it, and Rhys actively did what he could. He basically sacrificed himself as
his own peace of mind, you know, his conscience, in order to protect the people he loved.
And he also became Amarantha's like sexual plaything in order to keep all this hidden, to basically seem like he was aligning himself with her in order to protect his inner circle, his city, and his whole court, really, even the horrible people in his court.
Yeah, I mean, you actually wrote a quote down from the book, and it says, there are different kinds of darkness. There's the darkness that frightens, the darkness that soothes, the darkness that is restful. There's the darkness of lovers and the darkness of assassins. It becomes what the bearer wishes it to be, needs it to be. It is not wholly bad or good. And I think that actually describes Rhys and Hades perfectly. Like, it's how the person perceives the darkness of the underworld as to how they perceive the ruler of it.
Absolutely, which is why you get in ancient Greece that it was more of like a thing that had to be done, but, you know, it was like, you know, divine law, absolute, and then you get Christianized versions of it that see it as something that must be evil, which is very different from what it originally is. And then you get to see more modern retellings where you have a lot like A Court of Mist and Fury, where there's so much more nuances in it. It isn't completely bad, completely good, that like how Rhys is. Sometimes he's a total prick, and Feyre calls him out on it, and she's not afraid of that.
Yeah, exactly.
But there is this like heart of gold to him almost.
Yeah, I also think, I'm going to put this to you, like in the underworld of the ancient Greek version, there is a place where you have pleasure, and then there's a place if you're punished for leading a horrible life on Earth. Like, there's a heaven and hell kind of, realm in the underworld. It's not just one certain place. Like, there's a place of reward and a place of punishment in the underworld. And I think we could actually apply that to the book, A Court of Mist and Fury, when you think about Valeris compared to the actual Night Court. Because,
the Court of Nightmares.
Yeah, in the Court of Nightmares, it's punishment, if you think about it. Because, all of these evil people are there. All the cruel people are separated from the good people that Rhys looks after. And he's two different leaders when he's in either place. So, I'm just going to shove that one out there while we're at it.
Yeah, and another thing that's interesting, so in the Greek underworld, there's the Elysian fields where it's there's the regular kind of drab place that a lot of people end up, and then there are the punishments. And you do see that there are a lot of people in the court, in the Night Court, that don't really belong to either. They're just kind of characters, really, but they either allowed to happen, or just the regular that you see Rhys will walk by, and people don't really know. They're just oh, okay, whatever. They're kind of immune to either one of those. So that's something that's interesting, that you have even in a small regard, the differences between that.
Yeah, totally. You kind of blurped out there a little bit, but I think we got the gist of it. Having some technical difficulties over here. All right, another thing is that in several retellings, they show Hades to be, at the very least, Persephone's equal, or even fearful of her. And like we hit on earlier when we were talking about Feyre, is Rhys treats Feyre as his equal. And he also understands that she is more powerful than he is. And he doesn't let it bother him. That's amazing. Do you know how many men get intimidated by women of power, even now? You know?
And when you see Tamlin, who's there's no such thing as a high lady, and then Rhys is no, Feyre is the high lady of the Night Court. There's nothing else.
Spoiler alert. We're getting really bad about this. We should probably put the spoiler alert before we even start talking.
Yes, that would be. Yeah, that is really important, I suppose.
Yeah, but at the end of A Court of Mist and Fury, Tamlin was a high lady. There's no such thing as a high lady. Go back to your painting, And then there's Rhys, and he's bitch, you are my high lady. You are my equal. Yeah, he's awesome. Now there are plenty of similarities, but there also are several differences. We don't know what Persephone's reaction is to being cloistered up all the time, but I imagine it sucks for her. We just don't know what it is. And Feyre just she doesn't fucking like it at all. Not to mention she's dealing with PTSD. So, I mean...
Yeah, and that's something that I find so interesting, is that we actually get the female side of it. We get to see her reaction to being in Spring Court, in the Night Court, her reactions to as she grows into her powers. And, in order to get Persephone into the underworld, it was just a marriage arrangement with Hades and Zeus. And that does not fly today. That's not something that you would want to see in a modern retelling. So it's her going by choice. It's her kind of needing to be away from the Spring Court and to find out who she is, to deal with her emotional issues.
Yeah, because on the one side, she's dealing with the PTSD, but then you also have Tamlin, who, after everything that happens under the mountain, has, we loved Tamlin when we first read it. I'm sure, I'm sure most people liked Tamlin a lot. And then you could tell that things were different after Under the Mountain. And he really reminded me of an abusive boyfriend. He controlled her every move. He was forcing her to be in places she didn't want to be, and he just turned into this awful person that was very controlling. And I mean, there's this one part where he explodes in his temper, and then he's it's just a bad day. Tamlin, I don't know. His character is also very interesting, and we'll actually probably have to do a podcast on whether or not he's really evil, because I feel like there's a lot of nuances that people automatically want to assume that Tamlin is like the worst. But is he really, or is it just like a victim of his circumstances kind of thing? We'll definitely have to get into it another time. But, you know, actually I veered off so much that I don't even remember what I was talking about.
So other differences, we were talking about the agency of women in a court of, or ACOMAF, as opposed to the original Hades and Persephone myth.
Yeah, and and in this book, women call the shots a lot more, so it's rather interesting. Or at least they're on equal footing with the dudes, whereas it was a patriarchal society, you know, in ancient Greek myth, like, women weren't allowed to do anything without a guy's permission. So, fun stuff.
But one of my favorite quotes from A Court of Mist and Fury is something that really, I think, takes it to a whole other level, where no matter what happened, like the variations of the original myth, Hades does take Persephone without her permission. That is definitely at first him being like, "You are mine now." And Feyre at one point says to Amren, he thinks he'll be remembered as the villain in the story, but I forgot to tell him that the villain is usually the person who locks up the maiden and throws away the key. He was the one who let me out.
Yeah.
And that is such a cool thing.
Yeah. Oh, man. It just goes to show, you know, and I think it's also that, you know, you can't judge by first impressions. Like, I think this is one of the lessons that you could take away from both books, is like, when we first meet Rhys in A Court of Mist and Fury, like, he's an asshole. I mean, he's still an asshole, but he's a likable asshole.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you can see the transition. Like, he was such a great character. Like, I think that's what I like most about him, is I actually find him a better character than Feyre. Not to say that Feyre is not a good character, but I feel like Rhys's character is really nuanced and thought through. And, oh, man, I could go on, so I'm going to shut up.
Well, Rhysand is also a fair amount older than Feyre, so he's kind of come into his own. And Feyre is like the perfect conduit for the story, where she's starting to become the woman that really is a force to be reckoned with. And we're probably going to absolutely love her in ACOWAR.
Oh,
she could become some people's favorite character in that, I'm assuming.
Yeah, someone said something about how the covers, you can see her transition, you know, like in the first cover she's kind of hidden and sheltered, and then in the second cover you can see her kind of branching out, and then in the third cover she's front and center, you know.
And I love that. You don't get that in so many things. Like, sometimes you'll see like the face and it's supposed to be all pretty, but this isn't about the pretty. She's holding a dagger. She's ready to take somebody on.
She's
and I'm
ready.
Like, yes,
she's
yes.
ready to fight some bitches. I am so ready for her to do it. Lord, it's March. I cannot wait until May.
We're gonna have to do, before ACOWAR comes out, have to do a thing all about the theories that we have, and maybe try to get some other fan theories in to see what people think will happen.
Yeah,
and then contrast that once we finally read it.
Yeah, there are quite a few, but I think next week we are going to be doing the that game that, God, what was it? Where you like put the different characters together.
Rip it or ship.
Yeah, rip it or ship it. I think that's going to be fun. Ship it. We're going to take we're going to have a cup of Throne of Glass characters and a cup of a court of characters. And then we're going to, like, draw from each one and then put them together. Like, for instance, you know, would Rowan and Feyre be a good couple? You never know. So.
Yeah, or something could come up like a lead and more and be like, we'd have to think about this one.
Interesting. Yeah. Like, so that's what we're going to do next week. So, yeah, I think we pretty much, again, proved our point that there is a lot of inspiration from Hades and Persephone in A Court of Mist and Fury, but also a lot of remarkable differences between the two. Either way, both are amazing. And I think that's pretty much it. So, If you guys want to contact us, you can contact us at, oh my god,
Sarah J. Maas. Are you okay? Sarah J. Maas fans at gmail.com.
And
sorry, I got a little something in my throat and I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah, and on Facebook, you can totally like our page, facebook.com/Sarah J. Maas fans. And be sure to message us with any fan theories you have. Someone message us about how Amryn is a dragon. So that's going to be an interesting one that we'll have to research a little more. But we will talk about that one eventually. I actually think after the Rip It or Ship It, we'll do a little something on Throne of Glass to kind of get away from...
Yeah.
We don't want to talk about A Court of too much. You know, you might get sick of it. But, like, this is completely Maas related. So we'll do something Throne of Glass related after our... after next week. Next podcast. So I guess this would be a good time to let you guys go, and hopefully you will tune in next time. So, bye.
Thanks for listening.